I learned the precise weight of a joke the night my wife suggested we open the marriage. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. We were eating takeout in our small kitchen, the one with the Alexa routine that dimmed the lights at 9 and the Ring camera that pinged the driveway, and Hannah was talking about her new role as if it were a lover she'd only recently introduced to the table. She'd started at the boutique agency 2 weeks earlier. Sharper clothes, later nights, a new perfume that smelled like confidence and small compromises. "Maybe we should try an open marriage," she said, smiling like she was folding a napkin. "Just like exploratory. Healthy freedom, right?" I laughed, because the sound of it is safer than the silence that follows. I laughed because Hannah had always been both a joke and the punchline. But I watched her while I laughed, and I read the way her fingers kept searching for the edge of the table. She said it like a theory. Her eyes had already written the essay. Her voice wasn't theatrical, it was casual in a way that makes a lie comfortable. She used the language of self-help books and brunch panels, empowerment, boundaries, authenticity, and somehow those words gave an affair the gloss of an experiment. I remember thinking, not for the first time, that language can be a weapon when repackaged as growth. The next week felt like a slow chemical change. She wore blouses that stopped being about comfort and started being about signal. She stayed later, came home with lipstick marking the side of her cup, and mentioned networking until the word itself seemed to sweat. At dinner, she was distracted in a way that didn't belong to either of us. I made notes to myself, literal notes on my phone, because rationality is a kind of armor. I cataloged times she left, small expenses, the cadence of messages. My voice in my head narrated like a witness rather than a husband. Left for work at 8:47 p.m. Returned at 1:02 a.m. Team status, in a call. The banality of the record didn't make it less devastating. I didn't snoop. There's a difference between a partnership and surveillance, and I'm not a dramatic man who breaks into things. But we are connected in practical ways. Insurance beneficiaries, a mortgage, emergency contacts. Our lives are overlapped like two spreadsheets with a few merged cells. There is honesty that lives in the open, shared calendars, mutual logins, and that is where I looked. It felt less like betrayal and more like bookkeeping. The night I didn't laugh, the night the joke stopped, was the night I saw a preview on her watch. Same time tomorrow, I'll book the room. I opened our shared calendar like a man opening a letter he'd rather not receive. There it was. Client lunch with LH. Initials. The initials lined up on a Wednesday at noon. Hannah later told me LH was Lucas Hale. Lucas Hale was 41, polished, charismatic, the kind of man who kept flowers on his desk and compliments for the right moments. He was also her boss. Kara called that afternoon, Kara from HR, who used to pop into our lives like an obliging neighbor at company parties. "Did you hear about Hannah's promotion dinner?" she asked, voice airy. I heard the question, as I would hear a falling tile in a quiet house, a small sound that promises collapse. There was no promotion. Kara hadn't been invited. She was fishing. I listened. I gathered what I could without breaking trust. Travel receipts were public enough, corporate cards sometimes show up in alerts, and Teams statuses and conference room bookings are visible from shared devices. I checked our joint account and saw a recurring expense that read like a timestamp. The Langley Hotel, room 204. Not proof of Zex, never proof of intent, but a constellation of coincidences that mapped a place and time. When I confronted her, I kept my voice steady. I didn't accuse. Accusation demands theatrics. I didn't want a performance. I wanted answers. I wanted clarity. "Are you having an affair?" I asked, the directness a kind of mercy. "It's exploration," she said. It's just exploring what I've been missing. It's not about you." She used the phrase like a bandage. It's about me finding myself. Of what? Corporate policy? I asked, because my humor is a knife. She laughed, thin and quick. Don't be like that. When I found emails where she'd listed our home as separated in a benefits form, an internal HR form for emergency contact and tax purposes, I stopped pretending. The form was matter of fact. It required no drama. It required only a box checked in someone else's system. Someone had already made peace with us. There was a bureaucratic brutality to it that made my stomach drop. Paperwork doesn't care about affection. A checkbox renders personal history into a line item. The world outside our living room was strangely indifferent to the collapse of two people. People think separation is dramatic. They imagine a violent splitting, shouting, and slammed doors. For me, it was paperwork and the methodical shift of keys and passwords. I logged into our accounts and began the quiet disentangling. Separate passwords, a message to the landlord about changes, moving a percentage of savings to an account she'd never used. I updated delivery addresses, unsubscribed shared services, and changed the way our mail was routed. It sounds small to catalog these things. Phone numbers moved, credit cards separated. But those are the levers reality responds to. You make choices in decimal points, and then you live inside them. Hannah spiraled between guilt and blame, insisted, Lucas loves me. She spooled a narrative where desire equaled devotion, and where being wanted meant being safe. He told me he cared, she said over and over, as if repeating the sentence could make it true. Then tell him that over HR, I said, light as a friend, heavy as a verdict. Kara warned me discreetly that Lucas had been under scrutiny for favoritism. She wouldn't say more on the phone, but later over coffee she sketched it for me in shorthand. Pattern of promotions, after-hours catch-ups, a manager with a soft spot for young talent. HR sees patterns other people ignore. She said, sometimes people are surprised to find out they're part of someone's pattern. I began to see a broader map. Hannah wasn't the only one in a loose orbit. Lucas floated in tensions like a net, and when something snagged, he'd quietly cut it loose. The map complicated into a system that protected him. The turning moment came on a Friday. I was stacking dishes while Hannah paced the living room, phone tucked like a secret in her hand. She stepped onto the balcony for a call, and laughing, heard from the street below, came the precise, oily voice I knew from LinkedIn. You shouldn't have told your husband. Now it's a problem. It wasn't a threat made with fists. It was a small, surgical threat. Remove the variable that will contaminate me. Now it's a problem. Those words fell and lodged. There is a violence in small phrases. They rearrange who loses and who is protected. Men who worry about reputation have a vocabulary of erasure. It's efficient and cruel. I watched Hannah's shoulders fold into herself as if someone had physically rearranged her ribs. Rumors at an agency spread like coffee stains. Someone mentioned an HR complaint. Another mentioned Lucas's late dinners with junior staff. The office is a small world. Gossip travels quickly and anonymously. HR called Hannah in. She called me from the car park, breathless and bright with a kind of disbelief. They're saying it's one-sided, she told me. Her voice was raw. He says he never reciprocated. He says he didn't know. He says He claims it was one-sided? I asked. So the man in power says he didn't use power. Yes, she said. They say I breached the ethics clause. They're putting it on me. Where Lucas had built a reputation, he could, with a well-placed sentence and the right audience, erase someone else's. It is a primitive, ugly economy. He claimed vagueness. He claimed ignorance. He claimed boundaries where there were none. HR, fearing liability, acts fast. Policies exist to protect the firm first. They terminated her for breach of conduct. The word terminated has a bluntness to it, like a paper cut. She came home with a cardboard box and a printed notice that said HR had concluded an unacceptable breach of conduct. The letter was sterile. It recommended outplacement services, but the immediate effect was social. Colleagues who had chatted in the kitchen now avoided meeting her eye. Offices have rituals and boundaries. Being cast outside them is a very public kind of loneliness. She came home fragile. "You ruined my life," she threw at me once into the couch cushions. "You handed him the knife," I said. I meant only the truth. I packed my office box with the same steadiness I'd packed our accounts. I took only what I would not regret: a favorite mug, a set of pens, a photograph of Maya and me at a work event. Files stayed behind. Relationships that had been fused into the workplace would have to be reassessed in their new, separate forms. It felt like closing a chapter in a book and realizing the book would still exist, but not on the same shelf. Maya helped me relocate to a short-term rental. She drives like someone who pulls a wedge under a door. Practical, efficient. "Temporary is a thing," she said. "We are not decorative objects. We adapt." I wanted to tell her that the pain wasn't dramatic, but domestic and persistent. She would have understood. Hannah showed up at the rental 2 days later, sunlight making her eyes too honest. She had been hollowed. The firing had taken the shape of hollowing rather than breaking. "You could have saved me," she said. "You could have said something sooner." "I didn't speak to him," I said. "I didn't give him any lines to use." She wanted me to be a different kind of man. Loud, protective, avenging. She wanted a hero algorithm she could reboot to fix her mistakes. I had never been good at that script. My idea of retribution was quieter. I had documented evidence where it mattered, in emails, in calendar entries, in the small administrative things that build a case. Evidence isn't a bludgeon, it's a tool. We met in a cafe the following week in daylight because daylight reduces theatrics. The cafe was half empty. People reading newspapers. The barista made coffee with an efficiency that suggests repetition can be a comfort. I ordered black coffee and watched Hannah as if she were a case study in consequences. She wanted me back, as if a cooling-off period could unwrite choices. "After things cool," she said, "we can work on us. I put a sheaf of papers on the table, separation papers, the HR notice she'd received from the agency, printouts of calendar entries and the hotel booking record. She scanned them like someone reading the results of a test. "You want it open?" I asked. "You got it, just not the door you expected." She sobbed then, small and sudden. It wasn't the melodrama I'd expected earlier, a sound more like someone releasing air they'd been holding for a long time. Her face crumpled the way it does when someone realizes a calculation will not round the way they hoped. I want to be precise about how HR moves. There is an inevitability to it that people imagine as chaos, but which is almost algorithmic. An allegation arrives, a manager is interviewed, statements are collected. There is a neutral investigator who asks the same questions like a metronome: dates, times, witnesses, messages, context. Evidence is compared. Men like Lucas have already built buffers, reputation, colleagues who will testify about professionalism, strategic phrasing in meeting notes. Women who find themselves the center of an allegation are often left holding the raw edges. Hannah's HR meeting lasted an hour and a half. She told them about lunches and about the hotel room, about the way Lucas made her feel seen. She cried in fits and then in a slow leak. HR took notes, asked for names, asked if she wanted to file a formal complaint. The investigator, a woman with a gray bun and a kind face, said, "If you choose to file a complaint, we'll investigate thoroughly." The word thoroughly sounded like something heavy and cold. After the meeting, as Hannah left the building, someone from legal walked with her toward the stairwell. It had been a long day. Closed doors behind closed doors. I wasn't there for all of it. I was at home stacking dishes and answering calls. But I knew the mechanics. When a company perceives risk, they prioritize containment. Firing someone is an ugly calculus. Sometimes it's about culpability, sometimes about optics, and sometimes about cutting off the bleeding regardless of who bled first. When it came to her termination, They cited the ethics clause. The letter offered a courtesy window for outplacement services and a severance negotiation, but the immediate effect was primevally simple. She was someone who had been turned out. Colleagues no longer shared lunches with her. Someone withdrew a LinkedIn endorsement. The office plant in her cubicle wilted. She accused me of silence, of cowardice, and sometimes I believed her. I asked myself often if I could have done more, if a louder voice would have changed the trajectory. There is a gendered mythology about defense, the man who roars and reclaims. Real life rarely offers roars that don't come with cost. An aggressive confrontation with Lucas or a public shaming risks legal minefields. I wasn't interested in making enemies of lawyers. I wanted stability. So I mapped the path that would minimize additional damage. Still, there were nights when I almost called Lucas. I imagined walking into his office, flipping over the ethics policy, and reading him the riot act in a voice that matched the anger. But fantasies are different from choices. I chose the quieter road, the one with receipts and timestamps. There is an odd comfort in documenting things, the same comfort a surgeon feels when a procedure is going according to plan. Hannah did not accept the separation easily. There were moments, small, sharp, ridiculous, when she tried to reinsert herself into our life with the bravado of someone who thought it was all salvageable with the right words. "We can fix this," she'd say, lipstick smudged at the corner. "People make mistakes." I listened. Sometimes I thought about the years of laughter and the way she could make a room warm. But a pattern is a thing you inherit. If she had wanted to be part of a team, she could have pushed boundaries differently. She chose a different route, and there are consequences for routes taken in secret. The day she appeared at my new place was the day the narrative simplified. She was on the sidewalk, rain or sun irrelevant, and she said, "You could have saved me." It was a claim heavy with expectation. I had to be honest. I didn't speak to him. I didn't keep his secrets. She wanted an explanation that would absolve her, and I couldn't offer one. There was a finality to the way the agency washed itself of her. Spin control, talking points for clients, a hush-hush talk with the legal team. Lucas kept his job for a while, the way reputations sometimes regenerate. People who are invested in them rally. Hannah was left with a letter and an empty desk, and the world outside our kitchen continued to be made of other people's errands, traffic, and the small mechanical things that keep a city from noticing private ruin. Maybe my revenge was a cold thing, but it accomplished a clarity. Hannah could not point to me and say I had hidden from the facts. The facts, in the end, are stubborn. They sit in databases and calendars and receipts. They do not have mercy. I had given her transparency, and she had used it to build a separate life without telling me. That revelation had consequences. I do not relish her pain. I watched her fall with a humane distance, like an arborist watching a tree come down. Necessary, regrettable, inevitable. There is a professional steadiness in seeing consequences through. People call it vengeance. I call it completion. Driving past the building later that week, I thought of the small rituals that mark a life: a nameplate, a desk lamp, a plant on an office windowsill. Now her nameplate was gone. Dust gathered on the desktop like a tiny, slow accusation. The blinds were open, sunlight making the empty chair look almost like a stage set after the actors leave. Some doors don't need closing, they slam themselves. There is no repair left to offer,